Can I start sharing screen, sir?
So
Yes, yes, you can. I made you co-host. You can.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Honorable guests, revered academicians, colleagues, and my dear student friends, a pleasant morning to one and all. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone for this final day of our international conference on diaspora across time and space, multifarious understandings of Indian diaspora literature. It's a great honor for me to welcome and introduce our chief guest of this session, Ravinder Kegel. After completing his MSc Mass Communication at Guru Jambheshwar University with a project on need and gratification sought from television in rural areas, he pursued another master's degree in educational technology at Concordia University, Montreal, with his thesis entitled The Effect of Collaborative Learning on Student Achievement, a Meta-Analysis. Gill started his academic career at Punjab University Colleges during the period of 2004 till 2012. After working as a teaching assistant in the Department of Education in Concordia University for 4 months in 2016, he continued his services at Integrated Studies in Education, McGill University from January 2018 as a teaching assistant, course lecturer, and demonstrator till date. 4 publications ranging from his post-colonial ideology to the uses of augmented reality in learning sciences and technology as a moderator to the role of media in teaching for revitalizing teacher education stands proof of his efficiency in promoting the technological aids in teaching and learning. He had presented 10 10 research papers at various universities from Haryana, Punjab to Concordia, Harvard, Philadelphia, and in which he had been awarded jointly the second prize, the Commission Scholar de Montreal, that is CSDM, in 2016. Ravinder had received cash awards from McGill University from 2016 till date. He is a proud recipient for 2 times of Graduate Excellence Award in 2016 and in 2019. Graduate Research and Education Travel Award, that is great, in 2017. Abdul Award in 2018. Dissertation Proposal Award in 2019 and FRQSC Doctoral Research Scholarship of 28,000 dollars for the year 2020 and 2021. Gill had rendered voluntary services to the community at an International Society for Performance Improvement in 2016 at uh, 22nd International Congress on Personal Construct Psychology at Concordia University in 2017 and at Provoking Curriculum Conference at McGill University in 2017, and he had completed 4 edX courses in 2014 offered by Harvard, MIT, and Queensland universities. Now he is here to speak with us. Yes, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. This is, I feel blessed, such a great warm welcome. I never received from anyone. And you just like
Hard work.
recollected what I have been through. Most of what you have suggested and explained, I might have forgotten. But thank you very much for making these recollections. I totally thankful to you for this.
Thank you.
Great. So, first of all, pranam to all my Indian colleagues joining from different parts of the world. And this is the real traditional salutation we offer to everyone. And I love this. Thank you very much. So today I'm going to talk about a very important topic that is part of my identity, that is part of my subjectivity, and that is part of my belongingness as Indian diaspora who is living in Canada. So I would like to say that this is my first-hand experience, and this is not fabricated, this is created, and this is lived experience, I should say. which is really, I'm in the middle of the things and I really love that. So the topic for today's talk is I'm going to talk on mapping the identity, subjectivity, and belongingness of Indian diaspora living in Canada. And one thing I need to ensure that this is really a very big topic, but I'll try to condense it in relation to Sikh Indian diasporic community, which I belong to somehow, and I'm part of that. So that will be specificity I'll be focusing on. Okay, so let's start. The outline for today's work, which obviously a paper, and it's a paper in progress, I should say. My friend, my colleague, and my guide, you can say, Professor Jai Singh, invited me, and I accepted this offer because it's kind of privilege to talk to him and to talk to the audience he arranged in terms of the conferences like this. So I decided, like, I jotted down the idea. It was kind of off the cuff preparation of this particular topic. Although it was a part of my research, so I decided to talk on this. So how it will work? I guess I'll have at least 40 minutes to talk. Sorry, excuse me, sorry. Great, thank you. So I'll talk about a little bit introduction, what is traditional diaspora and what are the virtual, it's a very debatable term, virtual or digital or e-diaspora, web diaspora. I mean, there are different, what do you say, nomenclatures used for this diaspora, which is virtual, digital. So we will talk about it a little bit. And then I'll offer a conceptual frameworks like what is identity, what is subjectivity, a little bit touching on these points, and how these three concepts construct, I should say, help us to, help us to identify, understand, reflect, or conceptualize the topic of identity, subjectivity, belongingness of Indian diaspora living in Canada. And then I'll specify the case of Sikh diaspora in Canadian context. And in this context, I'll talk about the sites of Sikh diaspora in Canadian context. Then I'll try to understand the processes which we go through to create or engage in diasporic, what do you say, deliberations in Canada. And then the practices which we adopt, which we go through in terms of being part of diaspora, becoming, and doing of the diaspora. These are the three words I'm gonna focus on. And then I'll talk about the challenges at the moment we are facing, because we are living in a postmodern, post-national, transnational, globalized society. So obviously there are opportunities and there are challenges. So we accept everything. And I don't shy away not to talk about this. I will for sure talk about the challenges in the end. Okay, so someone asked me, like, as a layman person, if someone asked me what is a diaspora, as a layman definition for me, like, diaspora is a relational term. When I say relational, means it is associated. It is something which we relate to, not exactly. So that's why I use relational. It's a post-national and it is a transnational space. So that problematizes, that give a kind of complexity in terms of the relationship between nation, for me, nation where I'm living, like a Canada, and my origin, the native land, that is India, soil, land, I should say, and identity, the product that is my identity. So it is largely what? It is means diaspora is largely reflected in the ways diasporic community means people, community of people, community of practices, community of culture, community of, like, imagined community. Like Anderson says, 1991, Anderson says, imagined community. Mostly diasporic people thrive on sustain with imagined community because they think that there is a community they are communicating with. And the digital form of diaspora is very much like relying on imagined community. So diasporic community basically recollect, remember, revive, and restore its native culture of origin. So these are the ways through which we can understand our contribution, our part, our being, becoming, and doing of diaspora. Okay, notifications are coming. I'm allowing all the participants to be my listeners. Okay. Next, so diaspora can be seen as the margins of the state. Margins of the state means there is a center. Our center is like our country, our native country, to like Canada, UK, USA, Europe, Australia, any part of the world except India. So we are on the periphery. So we are on the periphery, we are on the margin of the state, and our state is India. So which offers basically, which offers basically an insight, an intuition, an understanding, a way to learn into the ways in which the conceptual boundaries are rethought, remade, and reformulated. So Das and Paul 2004 has given this particular assertion, so which I need to explain, which I need to like talk about a little bit. The next thing is, yes, when we talk about diaspora, it is really important to understand, to like highlight, to underscore, to underline the trajectory, how we form or be part of diasporic culture, or what makes that we are diasporic. So everything starts with ourself. That is, our self means self with capital S, self. Self means I means I, the knower, who knows the thing, who tries to know the thing, who tend to know the things, and me. Me means what is known about me. So these two terms are very important to understand when trying to understand in terms of identity, subjectivity, and belongingness. What is I? I means the doer. I means the agent. I means the core. And when I say me, somebody asked me, what is me? Me means what is associated I'm to. I'm associated with. I prone to. What is mine? That is me. For example, my mother, my father, my country, my land, my property, my teacher, my sons, my daughters, whatever is mine, that is mine. So I and me are the two associated terms that make us complete in terms of our identity. There are many other reformulations, versions, diversions of forming identity, but these are the two major construct to understand identity. So this particular image you see on your screen, this is really interesting to understand the visual trajectory of diasporic formulation. So the biggest outermost circle is the personal circle. Personal means this is the biggest circle. Everything comes inside. So personal is the biggest one, under which we find social, professional, and everything, which I'm gonna talk a little bit about in a short while. So personal, when I talk about personal means the core. Who am I? That is our familial, biological, cultural part that we cannot change. It includes our beliefs, our culture, religious, ethnic, every type of beliefs. And the next circle is social. Social means our formal, informal, social institutions, political ideology, cultural rights and roots. So they are the second school of our learning, where we are shaped into some person, into some ideology, anything we become as a part of that. And the innermost circle, that is professional. Professional means who we are. That is decided by the action, our activity, the way we work, the roles we have, everything that belongs to us is in terms of our role, function, that is a professional. So we are teacher, so people call us teacher. That is our activity. So given all this, and all these personal, social, and professional are always overlapping. They are not exclusive, they're inclusive. So you cannot just like dissect, and you cannot part with each or other from like individually. They're part. If you understand one's identity, you need to look through these three things: personal, social, and professional. Now, interestingly, this overlapping, this trajectory inform me that there is a conceptual frames. I mean, there are some signifiers to understand how to understand our identity. So one thing is identity, the other is subjectivity, and then there is a belongingness. I would like to take little opportunity to discuss what identity is basically, because identity is much spoken topic and even still much debatable topic. I'm not the final authority, and I feel myself limited to put this word into a frame brackets that can define identity. But my readings till now and my association with literature inform me that what identity is. So identity is largely viewed as a fluid and complex. This is the postmodern way of formulating identity. If you go to the modern view of identity, that says identity is stable, fixed, and constant. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking the postmodern. Identity is fluid, identity is complex. So, and it is inherently means it is intuitively from inside. It's a social, means dialogic. We cannot create identity without dialogue. So interaction is there. Alsop 2006 has talked about this, like he's saying this, or not, sorry, it's a she saying like this. So it's kind of complex interplay between one's experience and cultural, social, institutional, and environmental context. So there are two things come into play: our personal experience plus the outer experiences that include cultural, social, institutional, and environmental. So these two, like to construct experience and other contextual factors shape our identity. So a critic that is called G E, and also it's called G-E. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but it's a European guy, but spelling is GG for George E. So G, I can say. 2017, he has offered two dimensions of understanding identity. He says that identities are activity-based, means which are chosen by us freely, like the way we work, the function we perform, like a teacher, a writer, social worker, doctor, student, mechanic, whatever you can. This is not exhaustive list. You can keep on working, keep on taking, keep on like explaining this from many professions, as many as identities. These are activity-based identity because these are the form which are created through social organizations. And then there is another form of identity that we understand, that is affinity identity, which we associate with ourselves in terms of internet connected user. So that is second identity. That is part of activity-based identity, I should say. Then the second type of identity is a relational identity. What is a relational identity? Very interesting. When somebody asks me relational identities are basically the classificatory labels people assign us. For example, Asian American, Indian Canadian, white, brown, or black based on color, Hindu, Sikh, Catholic. I mean, these are the imposed identities. These are compulsive identities. These are unstable identities. These are the diverse identities, and conflictual because we don't accept it sometimes. This is an identity crisis, basically, I should say. If I'm a brown and working as a teacher at McGill University, but this is the identity form which I see through, which I perceive by myself. But hold on, there is another identity, the second identity, double identity given to me by other person. What is that? That I am Asian. So there are two identities. And we always live in dual identity. When we live in a European country or outside Indian context. Even in Indian context also, there are so many classes, we have different multiple identity, but this is a long topic, we cannot talk. So when these relational identities are like framed, these are they become the ground of battle. They become the conflictual play in terms of the way we understand ourselves. What does it mean? It means that our diasporic identity, now here I connect diaspora to identity. We are human being with same blood and flesh, two arms, two legs, same torso, same eye configuration, everything is same. But our geographic location, our culture, our societal system, and everything we come from, we carry as a luggage, give us as dual identity. Okay. And all this process through assimilation, socialization, and acculturation. These three main words are important. Part of society, part of sociology, but they also part of us. Very much present in our life and living. Okay, now subjectivity. Subjectivity is, in simple words, refers to the ways we make sense of ourself, self in capital S, which we attain through multiple voices. Like at home, you are father or a son if you have father. You may be husband, you may be a wife. At college, you are a professor. And same time, if you go to a sports ground or somewhere else, you're a player. I mean, their identity is changing based on the context we work in, we live in, where are we present. So subjectivity also changes this way. So subjectivity basically depends on our own perception of self, what we think of ourselves, number one, what others think of us, number two, and what is the impact of others thinking on us and how we take their thinking that we are this or those. So there are three things: what we think ourselves, what others' perception of ourselves, and what our perception of ourselves resulting from what others think of us. So three things important. So these three things like decide our subjectivity. At the same time, you might know William James and you might know Bakhtin. They talk about I and me, self, as which I just highlighted a little bit before. But that's not the point of our talk today. So I should say, when I talk of subjectivity, subjectivity is always reflected in dialogic discourses. When we talk, when we interact, and our discourse is always with us, intrapersonal discourses, interpersonal discourses, and relational and subjective discourses as part of our society. So we always talk like this. Multiple I positions are the result of these discourses. In this sense, we can say diasporic persons like me assign or being assigned multiple I positions. I position means identity positions based on my positioning, where I work, which activity I involve in, and where I live in. So these three things: place, work I do, function, we can say, and the context in which I live. And belongingness, thirdly, belongingness is a kind of affinity identity, means associated identity, can be viewed as a form of identity that develops through our participation in shared experiences, which we create while talking with others. And social practices, two important words: shared experiences and social practices of the group we are part of. For example, it may include communities built through face-to-face interactions, maybe including digital diaspora. So we can talk about social media networks, social media sites where we create communities and we attach ourselves, we become part of those communities. So network platforms, I should say, which strengthen our sense of belonging to others. So basically, we cannot live in a vacuum. Similarly, our whole existence is a part of dialogue that shape our identity. Diasporic me, belongingness is both as a means and outcome when I connect to someone. So this connection, these discourses which I create while connecting with others is my identity. What other people think of me what I'm thinking about myself, and what is the effect of other people's thinking on myself, which I take as for granted or with concern or contempt. That also decide my identity. Okay. So what are the sides of diasporic play? So there are two types of sites. One is traditional. I just talk about like anything which we have been doing in face-to-face mode, in through festivity or through other ways which are traditional. That is a traditional site. Family, friends, culture, all types of religious institutions through which we part, we assemble, we congregate. These are the traditional ways. And digital, also called web-based, also called connected, also called internet-based. These are the different forms of digital. Okay. So if somebody asks me what is a traditional, what is a digital diasporas, so I will take opportunity to spend like 2 minutes here. So traditional includes traditional ways of communicating, communing, and creating native experiences through imagined communities. The word imagined communities is by Anderson. When I say imagine, it means that we always presupposes a condition that who we are talking to, we are part of that. So that is why it's called imagined community. We are connected. And digital is a relational term to envision new identity and virtual community. New identity and virtual communities that are informed by new forms of communication. Every new forms of communication can be included, like social media, YouTube, everything, WhatsApp, website, blogs, everything. Okay. And next, when we talk about the word recalibrate is very important here. Recalibrate means we try to push ourselves, find connections. That is the basic essence of recalibrate here. And that intensify the pattern of mobility and hybridity. Means where we are. So mobility doesn't matter. Hybridity doesn't matter because we are communicating through digital ways. So we are everywhere at the same time while connecting throughout the world everywhere. So when what digital diaspora offers, basically, this is a challenging question and people ask. So digital diaspora basically offers a cartography, like a map, like a economy, I should say, to map, to understand, to self, ourself, our identity in relation to increasingly complex patterns. We are part of globalizations and localization. Localization because we live locally and have local culture, native culture. Global because we are dispersed, we are scattered, we are dislocated. So localization and globalization are two important. Closures important. It means we are not shutting doors to foreign culture. Suppose I'm living in Canada. I'm not ignorant. I'm not negligent. What do you say? Feel negligent in terms of embracing that culture. I'm part of Canadian culture, local culture, my native culture. And negative effects of politics. Obviously, politics are everywhere. India has its own politics. Canada has its own politics. Systematic racism, I should say. That is also part of politics, and I don't deny the fact that it is very much present in Canada. Yes, comparatively less than other European, UK, and USA, less than that. But obviously, the tints, the color, the features, the remnants, the residues are always there, and I feel that everywhere, my lifestyles, the way I interact with people, the way people accept me, recognize me, I feel that. So I should say, but what is digital diaspora? That ignores this at the same time to understand their culture. So there are two ways to understand this. One is bonding, how like connecting to nurture existing social networks and communities bridge with possibilities of cosmopolitization means sarvabhum, sara sansar. In Hindi, I should say, the whole world is ours. Cosmopolitan attitude by connecting with and forming bridges. So we are connecting. We are not like disengaged. We are engaged. Okay. that was a kind of traditional and digital diaspora in a nutshell. So now I'm like personalizing my experiences. So what does it mean if I'm a Sikh, if I'm a Hindu, if I'm a Christian? I'm putting myself in the shoes of every particular religious sect to engage in the conversation of becoming, being, and doing of diaspora as a Canadian. Please don't forget the please give a look to the images which are always on the right side. So they are representative of what I'm talking in a way. On the left side, they are like extension of the text which is on the left side in order to define what is on the right side visually. So please have a look. So engaging in diaspora. So there are sites, there are processes, there are practices. As a Sikh, how do I engage? Sites I just define, traditional and digital. Now, what are the processes through which I engage into this conversation, into this narrative, into this discourse? Let's understand. I'm very sorry, I'm not taking questions because I don't want to break the flow. Yes, I see there are comments, I see their hands, but I didn't find opportunity to go through the comments. I'll take those and questions when I finish it. So we're close to the things. So I'm trying to personalize it, and then there are three more slides, and we are good to take your questions. So what are the processes of diasporic connections? So the image on the right side basically is a community kitchen, which is if you go to Gurdwara, that is a Sikh temple in Canada. So you find people from different religions, you find a multitude of sects, religion, culture. You can find everything. This is in Indian context, it's called langar. So you can say over there, this is the main site of creating diaspora in face-to-face mode. That is traditional form diaspora. So identification of self, while being at places like this, I try to identify myself. Who am I? Why I'm there? Why I'm eating here? Because my presence over there is preceded by my thinking, my ideology to be there. So I'm a knower. I know who am I? Who am I associated with? Also, I know by others. What other things? Because if I wear a kada, that there are 5 kaka. In Sikhism, there are 5 kaka. Kada, Kanga, Kesh, but I don't have, but at the same time, those who see me through this, that I don't wear kada, they look me with the strange eyes. Oh, you're not part of us, you're not me. But at the same time, when they see the kada in my hand, the bangle, in English they say bangle, they say, oh yes, he is our people, good. So I'm also knowing myself through others' eyes. And I'm knowing about myself as I'm with those people. So this is identification. There are two main things. One is identification, the other is negotiation. So through identification and negotiation, we try to understand the process of diasporic connections and recognizing belongingness. So there are 2 ways to understand, 2 ways to connect, 2 ways to belong to others. There are 3. I'm sorry. One is engagement. The second is imagination, and the third is alignment. If you ask me what is engagement, engagement basically means is the process through which we invest efforts. I repeat, engagement is the process through which we invest efforts to connect with other members of community. Investing efforts to connect with other members of community. In the image you can see. You can directly see that I'm connecting with other people here. This is my effort to be being there. Imagination. Second, imagination means is the process through which we relate ourselves to the world. So I'm relating myself that I'm part of this Gurdwara. I'm being there. I'm representing, I'm formulating my identity in this way by engaging. This is kind of creative imagination in a way. And then there is alignment. Alignment means the practices. If I be there and serve the langar, do seva. So I'm using their practices to identify myself that I'm very much there. So their alignment, engagement, and imagination are very important. If you want to know more about this process, this model, Wenger, 1998 and 2010, he has given this model of identification and negotiation for further reading. You can go there, you can read it. And then there are practices. So practices means the actions, the activities I take part in. So these are very important. If I keep on thinking, if my thinking are just cognitive, metacognitive, that doesn't make me a diasporic entity. I need to be organically connect with the communities. And one of the ways to connect with communities is through the practices. Practices means the way I work with other people. Practices means the way I function. The practices mean the roles I identify with or assign to me. So those are the practices. So there are multiple ways of understanding practices as a Sikh, as a Hindu. So one of the ways is cultural. So on the right side, you can see the image. So there are girls who are taking part in Kirtan, Satsang. They are becoming a part of the Sikh heritage, religious festivals and festivity. On the bottom, the image, you can say there is a kind of a celebration that is Guru Parva. Every year there is a procession, and people like congregate and go for procession. That is kind of a festivity, religious festivity. When you associate yourself with this, you understand that yes, I'm part of it. You wear the symbols. And dispositional means the way I wear, means my outfits, my costumes, my emblems, my symbols. Like I just a short while ago, I just referred to cultural symbols, being a Sikh, being a Hindu. So you can say karpan. If I'm a Sikh, I need to wear a karpan, the kara, turban. There are many ways to identify, to show association with the dispositional dimensions of practices being a Sikh. Then there is historical. Historical means remembering cultural and religious histories. So these girls on the top and the guys on the bottom are integrating, participating in the religious ceremonies, and they are reviving the history of Guru Nanak Deva. There are 10 gurus by participating, by practicing these cultural cults. And then there's a spiritual, and on the top, the image also suggesting the allegiance to native deities, means Guru Nanak, Guru Tegh Bahadur, Guru Arjan Dev, whatever, whoever, but they are part of that. So these are the main 1, 2, 3, 4 lenses, 4 dimensions to understand the practices being a diasporic entity. And then there are other practices which I need to talk a little bit, like social. Social means if I'm a part of a community and I'm serving at the langar, not necessarily langar, I'm serving outside in the same Gurudwara or Indian temple. So I'm a part of that. That is a physical diaspora I'm doing. But at the same time, if I'm sermoning, being a part digitally, Skype, that can be digital. But association is very important word. So we are doing association for both, like in traditional way and in digital way, we are part of that. And then exchangeable. So normally in Canada, we have a culture inviting party basically in Punjabi, we say party. In Hindi, we say Pandit, Pujari, and what do you say? Like in English, we say it's gurus, religious gurus. Every year we have like a cycle. It's very cyclic, I should say. We invite people from India who come over here, who give sermons, like 2-3 months. They stay here and they go back, like as part of a religious journey. They're preachers. So that is also a part of like connecting back to diaspora. So inviting people. Then linguistic, very important. I can't like ignore this. This is the core. So the way I speak, the accent I have, the language I use, the words I like configure or construe are my part, are my identity, both in oral and written forms. So if I speak Punjabi, like I'm a Sikh, मैं Sikh हैगा, तो तुसी मैनू समझ रहे हो कि मैं Sikh कादे वास्ते हैगा. That is my identity. Suppose if I speak in English, Hindi, मैं हिंदू हूँ क्योंकि मैं भगवान राम को मानता हूँ. Obviously, my tone, my words are reflecting my identity. So if I means language is not necessarily a tool to represent who we are, but it's a means to refer who we are and who we try to be. So language is very much like very very slippery term I should use, but it is also people use to hide many things. Language is also means to hide many things, not necessarily tell everything. But as oral history, because we pass our culture orally, all sermons, songs, and teachings of our scriptures mostly passed through orally, oral means, and written forms are also there. And the last is folk arts, music and dance. So whatever is folk, dance, music, and there are other ways of folk, like fine arts, maybe they may be part of that. Drama, skits. If you ask me like Haryanvi, then there is a song that is a part of my folk. If you ask me like Punjabi, Bhangra is my part of folk. So these are the ways of identifying, like recollecting the experiences of our diasporic origin being in Canada. And if you see everything, let us example of digital diaspora. Say if I watch Punjabi music here, Punjabi songs, Punjabi films, while sitting in Canada, so I'm connecting to them. I'm associated. I'm connected with those singers who sing Punjabi songs. So I'm communicating with them through Instagram, through Twitter, through WhatsApp. So these are also means digital way. They're part of communications and they're product of being diaspora as well. Now the challenge is, the last slide is the challenges. Obviously, we know we have created a community of practices through which we understand our diasporic origin, but not necessarily that everything is good. No, there are many challenges also. What are the challenges? The first challenge is the globalization. Globalization means we are a big world village in which we know each other. That is like imagined community, I should say. Imagined, Anderson 1991 says imagined community. We pretend to take it for granted that we understand, we know each other. We are connected, we are like a global village. That is a main thing of globalization. And digital technology, digital diaspora is an offshoot, I should say, of globalization. So increasing rate of immigration, one of the main symptom, one of the main like impact or effect is the immigration. I'm also part of that. That's why I came to Canada, like as a permanent resident. I accepted. Westernizations, coming to the Western lifestyles. So obviously, being a non-vegetarian or being a vegetarian, you have different specifications. Being living in the cold region like Canada specifically, you need to like switch to Canadian diets, and they include non-vegetarian items. But I didn't come to that. I'm still like a vegetarian person, but in a nutshell, I should say I'm not the exception. There are many other people who can do that, but still, you adopt Western styles, not necessarily the way you eat, but there are other means of adopting Western, the way I wear my clothes, the way I wear my perfume, the way I go to college, the way I drive my car, the way I earn my living, the way I go to university, colleges. So all these stuff are kind of the representation of Westernization. And sectionalization, this is really crucial. There is an increasing demand since like 1984, since the assassination of Indira Gandhi and Guru Harminder Sahib. There was like a demolition of and big harm was done. This is a really sensitive topic. I don't want to talk about it, but the moment people still are like raising the demand for Khalistan. Khalistan means they want a different particular part, nation state inside India. As a handful of people, but this is also a political topic. I don't want to talk about this, but there are pros and cons. I don't know why they are asking for, but they're part of Khalistan when they're in Canada. Obviously, they are living their own way. So the last thing is the negligence of native language and culture. So the second and third generation Canadians who came from India to different parts of the world, not necessarily in Canada, who they went to, like who they migrated to or immigrated to any parts of the world, The second and third generations is like in oblivion of understanding their native culture, native language. If you ask my son, my daughter, I feel the same like thing. My son and my daughter are fluent in French. Their first language is French, the second language is English. But if I ask them a very simple, typical Haryanvi questions, "Ara chora ke karan lag gaya hai?" They will feel really hard to understand it. They don't know what Papa, what are saying. I don't understand. So this is like a native language. This is a Shini side, I should say, in the culture. But luckily, they are not forgetting the culture. They are part of the culture. They are still very much in the thick of the things, and they still embrace what we do. So all these stuff are really interesting. I'm open to your questions, and I'm happy to take your questions let me go for 1 second, stop share. Okay, thank you very much for bearing me. This was a really nice interaction, and I can take your questions. I would like to request Professor Jai Singh if he has any questions to talk. I'm willing to answer if I can.
Yeah, ma'am. Open the session for questions. So, dear Ravinder, thanks for giving such an enlightening, such an interesting and interactive talk on the issues of diaspora literature. So, we are all highly thankful to you. Now the session is open for questions, and we have 10 minutes time. So, yeah, up to now we only have compliments, interesting and beautiful explanations, interesting session, great presentation, great content, highly relevant and cutting edge information.
Wow.
I found a question.
Yeah.
Anjali.
Yeah. If you can see,
Anjali,
you ask.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can read the question. Thanks. I'm directing to Anjali. I'm sorry if I just misspell or add a wrong prefix, or is Mrs. Anjali or Miss. I just directly say Anjali. Okay, to be very formal, very informal. So Anjali ji, I can read your question out. Give me a sec, please. I pull up the question. Okay. Anjali is asking, when a new immigrant comes, how do the established diaspora receives him? Wow. Are there conflicting opinions? Very good questions. Yes. Like there are two versions of Anjali ji. I'm talking to you now. I'm directing to you in terms of the responding to the questions. So there are two types of immigrants here. One is those who come as a student, and the other, those who come as a permanent resident. So those who come with a permanent, there is one more diversion, that is those who come as a refugee, like a political, whatever you can say, those who flee from India and take shelter in Canada or anywhere. So those who come as a refugee are not accepted with the same feeling, same sensitivity which other comes, like as a permanent resident or like a highly skilled worker. Of course, there is a disparity. Now, those who come as a student, they are not part of immigration. They are just like a student. Yes, when they become part of the lifestyle, Canadian lifestyle, 2-3 years they study here and then they get permanent residency. So they receive a kind of acceptance from the native, the first, second generation established diaspora who are living there. Yes, but at the same time, I give you a practical example. Students really find it hard to get a rented room because their identity is still Indians. And you might have heard, like in 2016, many Indian students created a havoc, like a gunda vandalism in Toronto. So that also like affected many other students who were really very sane, very civilized, and very cultured. Due to that, 20,000 applications who were submitted to Canadian Immigration Department have been rejected right away. And they were, most of them who were part of the fight, deported. So yes, Students are at the lowest bar in terms of acceptance. Refugee are a little bit up because they are, you can say, not recognized as a part of immigrant. And who come as a highly skilled worker, yes, they are good. But obviously there is always a question, because it's a very subjective question. If you have some interest in someone, you accept him, you receive him. If you don't have, you don't. Interest may be financial, interest may be monetary, interest may be cultural, interest may be familial. So these are different, what is the dimensions to put into place. I hope, Anjali ji, there is something which I define a little bit in terms of your question. Anjali ji, can you hear me?
Yeah, they can hear, but they are muted.
Okay, they're muted. Okay, sir. There is one more question. I guess there is a hand has been raised. I don't know why the hand has been raised. I don't find any other questions. If there are other questions, I'm still open to them, and they can ask me questions. So we are taking questions in terms of
There
chat.
are other questions. I have noticed.
Sorry, ma'am.
I have noticed some more questions, sir, on the chat section. Just a minute.
Yeah, I see that there is a question.
Cosmopolitanism of, say, the idea of free borders challenging the notion of a nation.
Sorry, would you repeat it, please? Where the question is?
Around 957. That is previously.
Oh, that's
yeah.
Okay. 957. I'm just rushing to that.
From Devyani Agrawal.
Please repeat the question, ma'am. It will be great for me. Maybe I not pull that up.
Okay, isn't cosmopolitanism of, say, the idea of free borders challenging the notion of a nation?
Well, this is a question which goes up my head. I can't. I'm not an agency. I'm not an authority to talk. I have limited knowledge. Yes, obviously there are pros and cons of this. The notion of what was the point? Last point. Notion of what?
Notion of a nation.
Oh, notion of a nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily that immigrants are challenging the notion of nation. Even in India, who are part of India, are challenging the notion of nation. Not necessarily. Forget about immigrants. Take care of India also. We are challenged inside also. The notion of the nation is challenged over there. That's a really very, very deep question. Thank you.
Another one from Sharing Om. He had just thanked you for the informative session and posted the question, what are some of the risks of diasporas for practicing the native country's practices in the host country?
Wow. Yeah, there are some visible, identifiable, and what do you say? One more word I want to add here to explain the things. Perceivable risk. One is that the emblems, the symbols we wear as a part of our culture, like in France, like in 2019, there were incidents like people were wearing kirpan and like a kind of knife. They were debarred from the jobs, and that they were like they were stopped to enter the job market because they thought that the France government passed the bill in the parliament. They said that no, we can't allow this because it's too dangerous. So that is also one of the ways, because it's part of our practice. Similarly, in Canada, what is recently happened, I tell you, there is a way that is used by Islamic, the Muslims people, that the women basically burqa and hijab, correct? Completely black gowns or stuff they wear. But in Canada, we just recently passed a bill that has been passed through, I should say, that debar that like didn't understand and didn't accept burqa as a public uniform, public wearable cloth that people can wear in the public. If you are at work at public places, you cannot wear that. You need to open hijab. You need to be visible. So this is also attack because it's very much in conflict with what we have as a cultural symbol and what other countries impose on us as a part of their ideology, as a part of their ways of living. So there is a kind of a wall of conflict for sure. Yes.
And Devyani had posted another question. How do we accommodate refugees in cosmopolitan projection of diaspora? How do we accommodate refugees in cosmopolitan projection of diaspora?
Right. Yeah. So this is a good question in terms of my understanding. I can talk about because I know some people and I have some experience who come like as a refugee, and in the recent past, many people when Trump was elected over there, many people flocked from Canada, from US to Canada because we share the border. So the politics and the geopolitics in America, United States wasn't favorable. So they were forced to enter Canada because Canada is more liberal than United States, correct? So that, what I mean by saying that, I mean that refugees can be accommodated properly if they have a good story, real reason, and real danger in their country. But people are making stories for sure. They have everything established, like business, everything. They're very well settled. There's no real danger in the country they're coming from. Specifically, I can give you many examples from Punjab. They're very well settled. They're jamidars, they have landlords, good properties, everything. But at the same time, not necessarily they're making it like a political cause that there is a danger. But actually, there's no danger. There, in Punjabi, I don't know, but in Punjabi, I would say, those who understand Punjabi, I would say, "Odi rotiyan halle bhi seki jande ne." Matlab, that is the problem. It means that they're still caching the sensitive issue of Khalistan to justify that there is a danger in India, but actually it's not. India is the most peaceful, safe country because it's secular. I should say, but in Canadian context, I should say yes. But you cannot practice kirpan. You cannot wear other things. But in India, nobody stops you. So in this way, I think, yes, refugee, I'm going back to the questions. If their stories are true, there is real dangers. Yes. I wrote stories for those people. I tell you, give you example. 2 people came to me because they have hardship in explaining their situation to the judge when their case was on the table in front of the judge. And he asked me, okay, would you mind to create a story for me that is really compelling, that is really emotional, so I can justify that I'm a real victim of atrocity in India? I go, come on, are you serious? You want me to create a story without any experience of yours? I cannot do this. What is your real story? Just tell me. So I should say the story should be authentic, truthful, and there should be real danger. People come here for monetary gains, to get settlement here. They think that Canada, a different glorified image of Canada, but that's not the reality, I tell you. I understand. Okay. People from Canadian perspective, those who are in Canada understand where the shoe pinches. Those who are in India, they think, oh, Canada is a great country, full of dreams. Everybody's making money and you can do that. No, it's not that. It's not that. It's something, it's a different ballgame, totally. Yes, thank you very much. I hope I did like this.
Yeah, Ravinder ji, I think now we have to move to next speaker of the session. So people are so curious about your lecture, so the questions may keep going on for another 1 hour.
No, sir. This from Dr. Dinesh Nair. He had asked for what are the strategies adopted by the diaspora groups to keep their language of origin alive. And could you comment on the asylum diaspora and the queer diaspora in Canada?
Ma'am, I think now we should move to the next speaker.
Okay,
these questions,
okay, sorry, we are.
Ravinder ji can answer it in the end if we are left with some time.
Okay, sir. Or else we shall send the questions to Ravinder and let him answer them. answer those questions through mail.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
sir.
yeah.
Thank
so
you very
please-
much, Sergi, and I really appreciate your effort to invite me, to have me. And if I try to hurt knowingly, unknowingly, advertently, inadvertently, if I touch some sensitive point which wasn't like in the right place, I'm sorry for that, because this is really tough topic to handle.
Yeah, it was really very informative and interactive session. People liked it very much. The only thing is it was extremely interactive. It's a positive criticism.
This is the fruit. This is the fruit. This is the outcome. Basically, I love to have. And I mean, nobody challenged me. It means that things were not that bad, I guess.
So now, ma'am, Chitraji has joined. You can introduce her.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone,
that's
and
what
I really
happened.
enjoyed your interactions, and happy to be there. Thank you very much.
Just a minute. Please don't go. Yeah.
I'm not going.
Okay, so, because it is very much midnight over there. Our sincere thanks are due to the resource person of this session. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
You were about to tell us something. You just put up.
I would just one quick point that
Yeah.
I left India to come to Canada. Where I can go from Canada, ma'am? I cannot be displaced now anymore.
Okay. You're always welcome to India.
Thank you. Yeah, love to be there. Love to be there.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Hey, Chitra.
Oh, hi. Great.
Thank you very much, everyone. And it's really, I would like to ask just a quick question from Professor Jay. Is it okay to stay back for the next session, or
Yeah.
do I leave?
Yeah, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it, and great interaction with you guys. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be part of this.
Okay, sir. Take rest.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a dead of night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ji. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravinder ji.
Thank you, sir. Jai Singh, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
A minute to thank
Ravinder.
Ravinder.
Our sincere thanks are due to the resource person of this session, Ravinder Kegar, who took immense effort in opening us about the diasporic scenario, which is not only the problem at Canada, but all throughout the world. And I totally welcome his views on how this COVID-19 had made us digitally connected amidst the chaos around us and enrich us with other knowledge, that is knowledge gained. He clearly elucidated the Sikh diasporic community with a close observance, and amidst the time difference between India and Canada, sir, you brought your patriotic thoughts in your speech, and by posting the flags at your backdrop, we really admired that. And you just posed the various challenges of the diasporic community, the problems that they face at Canada. And thanks a lot, Ravinder. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind words. Thank you very much. At the beginning and at the finishing as well. Thank you very much.
Jai Singh, sir.
Yes,
Shall we
ma'am.
start the next session?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You just see here. Video இது போடுறதா ஓகே
On behalf of PG and Research Department of English, Vellala College for Women, Erode, Tamil Nadu, I accord a warm and cordial welcome to Dr. Jai Singh, Dr. Ravinder, Ms. S. Chitra, my dear colleagues, beloved students, and international research scholars, especially from Bhutan, who are connected with us to grace this occasion. I am Dr. P. Selvi, Assistant Professor of English, coordinating this vibrant session. Ms. S. Chitra is here to share her views with us enthusiastic participants of today's session. She is an Assistant Professor of English at Yanphula Centenary College, Royal University of Bhutan. She teaches Master's Program in English, supervises the research scholars, and serves as Program Leader for Academics and Research. She holds nearly 2 decades of tertiary teaching experience. Her service record includes teaching expertise in areas of English literature and language, along with contribution in curriculum development. Prior to her teaching assignment in Cherub's College, she worked as head for the Department of Languages in colleges affiliated to the University of Madras, and she had been a research scholar under the same university and a senior lecturer in the Department of Humanities, Anna University, Chennai, India. Her areas of interest include culture studies, contemporary literature, post-colonial studies, European literature, gender studies, with the minor projects in the field of folklore in Eastern Bhutan, as well as action research on students' English language proficiency level. She is also an IELTS trainer and has completed the teaching knowledge test certified by the University of Cambridge. She has published over 30 research articles in book chapters, journals, conferences, and presented papers in 50+ international and national conferences. She had been the overseas examiner for doctoral thesis and member on the Academic Board of Studies for syllabus validation. Her active engagement in international conferences steadily grows in the capacity of keynote speaker, as well as to deliver addresses in the inaugural and the plenary sessions. Now I hand over the session to Chitra ma'am. Please, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for this gracious welcome and your warm and kind words. So, vanakkam to all the organizers. And indeed, this virtual conference is connecting me to not only to India, but to my home state. Thank you so much, organizers, for this wonderful initiative and splendid effort. Thanks to Professor Jai Singh for making this opportunity a happening one for me. And my students have also joined.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. And we welcome all your students as well to this session.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah. You want to share screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I made you co-host, so you can do.
Shall I?
Yes, yes.
Is it visible, sir?
Yeah, you can share, ma'am. Before you, Ravinder also shared, no?
No, is it visible?
No, up to now it's not visible.
Okay.
Up to now it's not shared actually. Yeah, now.
So I think you could see it now.
Yes, now it's visible. Now it is visible.
Good morning, all the web participants. Indeed, it's my pleasure to join this virtual conference, and I feel like transported to my home state to see the interaction and the place and the faces from my culture and from my state. And I'm much honored to make this contribution to the students and to the academic body in general. In fact, my topic is in continuation of what Professor Ravinder Gill has been discussing. He has been talking about diaspora from Canadian point of view, but I have also by chance picked a Canadian writer called Jamie Seppa and her memoir. I have selected her travel memoir, where she has recorded her experiences as an immigrant, as an expatriate in Bhutan. Diaspora always talks about moving toward west, but here a Westerner has moved to the east. That's the difference of this book, and the experiences are unique, though certain diasporic sensibilities experienced by her are same with the international community of diaspora. This is the brief background of my topic, titled Diasporic Sensibilities of Women Across Cultures. Here I treat Atiya Hussein's short story and Jamie Zeppa's memoir. And to briefly introduce about the university, Royal University of Bhutan was established in 2003, and there are many undergraduate programs offered with 12 constituent colleges in different disciplines all over Bhutan. And this college where I belong to is called Enfla Centenary College. It's mainly meant for advanced studies that offers master's program in English for in-service teacher candidates. Now to move on, this is the brief overview of my presentation today. When we talk about diaspora and migration, there is a push and pull factor of migration. Let me distinguish these two factors. The push factor of migration is mainly compulsion. That forces somebody to move away from one's place, and the reasons might be varied. For work, for life, it can be a number of reasons, or as political exile. Whereas the pull factor of migration is something attracting, something pulling to move. And that pull factor of migration is mainly voluntary. These are the two factors at the outset. And here I have chosen two different works, one a short story and another a travel memoir. Let me rationalize the choice of these two texts. Atiya Hussein's short story, The First Party, does not mention the name of a country or the movement from east to west or anything like that. But it talks about the newlywed woman, the newlywed wife, and how the husband introduces the wife to his social circle. And in that social circle, the woman feels culturally displaced. In that sense, I take into account marriage also as a displacement for women. Either she is transported from one place to another, which are different in their culture, or even within the country, from conservative background to modern lifestyle, or from rural part to the cityscape and the cosmopolitan atmosphere. That also brings a cultural displacement in women especially, who is expected to accommodate and acclimatize herself with the life of her husband to continue her existence. So this is what is captured in The First Party, which talks about the cultural displacement of a woman. This is the rationale behind the choice of this short story, though it does not talk about different places, but still it talks about two different cultures and how one moves from old culture to a new culture, and the responses and the emotional experiences are same as of diasporic experience. Then I move on to the more focus of today's discussion is given on Jamie Zeppa's travel memoir titled Beyond the Sky and the Earth. It was penned in 1998 and published in 2000, A Journey into Bhutan. It talks about the immigrant experiences of a Westerner. She is a remote part of the world, tucked in the Himalayan ranges in the eastern Himalayas of India. And then comes the cultural displacement of women between Eastern and Western way of life, or between values, conservative values to modern values, and the real movement that happens across the globe from one place to another, from first world nation, that's Canada, to third world country, that's Bhutan. Could their experiences vary? That's the question which made me select these two texts. And how do they respond to these changes? In this, to answer these questions, the discussion mainly focuses on the conflicting stages from the memoir of Zeppa, along with the cross-cultural encounters that she had and the culture shock that she experienced along with the encounter, then moving on to cultural assimilation and then conclusion. With this overview, the question arises, whenever the movement happens, is it by chance or by choice? Traditionally, it is men who travel and migrate largely, while women travel mostly as dependents, where there is no choice for women, but marriage becomes the passport. And that becomes the chance for a woman to follow her husband as dependents. And this had been the case largely in the second half of the 20th century in the Asian societies, when women, upon marrying a man working abroad, will follow the man to settle in a new culture in a different country. And that's how migration had been perceived traditionally for women especially. However, international migration has become increasingly feminized toward the end of the 20th century as more women migrate on their own account rather than as dependent family members, according to the UN report. This being the basic difference between chance and choice, here let me account some of the brief background of these two texts. To go with Beyond the Sky and the Earth, Jamie Zeppa makes a willful choice. She wanted to travel from Canada, the first world, because she wanted to do something in the real world. She wanted to experience the real world, to do something, whatever that means. And her present world, the developed country, seemed very small for her. She was growing tired of reading theory and writing essays. Moreover, she had never been anywhere. She is just 33 at that time, but she had never been anywhere till 1988. And this desire to see the world propelled her to apply for a position. And before settling in the conventional Canadian life, she wanted to experience the world as such. And this made her travel towards Bhutan through a legitimate agency known as World University Service Center. It is a legitimate government-funded agency, and through this agency, she applied for a teaching post. There was a recruitment going on for teachers in overseas, and she preferred not to go to any other countries, but somehow she was attracted towards Bhutan. Then she consulted the library books about Bhutan, and this made her imagine. Bhutan became an imagined country even before she opted and traveled towards the country. She got mesmerized by the photographs she consulted in the library, and this is how her experience towards Bhutan started at the age 23. Though she is a Western woman who has the independent rights to make her decision and to decide her career and her choices, there were objections raised by her grandfather. And before that, let me introduce the background of her life. She hails from an immigrant family. Her ancestors moved from Poland and settled in Canada, and Jamie Zeppa was raised by her second generation Polish grandparents after the separation of her parents. So this travel being in her gene, she wanted to explore the world. She wanted to experience something different and construct an identity, a home for herself in a new place. But her choice was not without objections. Her grandfather, who believed in a safer, smaller, and a secure world, objected her going away over there. That's how he describes it. Instead, he wanted her to concentrate on I thought you were getting married. These were the objections raised by her grandfather, who was her guardian. But without answering any of these questions, Zeppa decides to experience a small tantric Buddhist kingdom in the eastern Himalayas by going over there. with the help of this WSC and their posting. This is how her travel across the globe begins from Canada, a first world country, towards third world country, from the land of skyscrapers to a traditional wood and stone structures, from bread and cream cheese to rice and chili cheese. These are all the subjective differences with the stark cultural differences, her journey begins. From Canada, the first world, to Bhutan, the third world. So what was the reason for her travel? She felt Canada to be very small, but ironically, she travels to a country which is literally very small and remote, and she gets her first posting in a remote village in Pema Gasol, and she is left to explore and to discover herself through many struggles, sufferings, through pain and grief. And here comes certain concepts. The fact is that migration not only creates a disjuncture, because she makes her choice against the apprehensive warnings of her paternal grandfather. What ifs? He raises a series of questions. What if something happens to you? What if you get ill? What if you are lost? And there were so many questions. And even her fiancé disapproved her choice. It's just too far away. That became their concern. It's too far, and she is going for 2 years service, and that 2 years time period is a long time for long time of separation for them. And I won't be able to phone you because the facilities are limited in Bhutan. The resources are limited then in 1998. So these were the concerns raised by the fiancé, because migration introduces a disjuncture between people and their homeland, also between their homeland and the new home. So this challenge, the challenge here is to capture the connection between imagining a home and constructing a home. As a result, what Zepa strives to do in Bhutan is to imagine her home country, that is Canada, in order to construct her identity and her own home in this new place. But regardless of where one chooses to migrate, one could not, especially immigrants, could not break away from their national ties with homeland, culture, and their roots. Because identity is a social phenomenon constructed by factors such as history, language, cultural practices, and blood ties. And these factors tend to get disrupted by the movement. And an expatriate ultimately becomes a displaced individual who loses his or her place and enters into an alien environment with different languages whose behavior and codes are unlived by the immigrant, and the expatriate becomes unhomely, true to Homi K. Bhabha's concept of homelessness. During the early days of her arrival, Zepa too felt unhomely due to these stark cultural differences. Basically, diaspora experience is about home and world, these two concepts. Home is the nation and the culture of one's origin, the place of one's origin. And the world is the nation one emigrates to. That's the destination. But for Professor Wendy, home is both the place of origin and destination. There is no distinction, but it is both the place of origin as well as the destination due to their significance in the construction of an individual identity. Because home is not only national, cultural, and social belonging, but it is also a sense of the self, of one's identity, to define who one is, who we are. It has all these set of characteristics in it with shared beliefs with the world. Therefore, Zephyr decides to journey to Bhutan as an escape from the so-called smallness of the world created by her grandfather in Canada, and ironically, she lands in a literally small and remote world tucked in the folds of the Himalayan range, where the future seemed to be closing in on her. Her individual rights exercised against the appraisal of her near and dear ones ultimately becomes a struggle toward self-discovery. Against this, I will be dealing with a woman's plight in the change of culture, that is cultural displacement. When a newly wed woman is culturally displaced, how her reaction would be. Because I found the reaction and the emotional responses more or less the same. The outline of the first party is that the husband takes his newly wed wife to their first socializing party. She is nervous and she is edging towards panic. And for the first time, she encounters with English language. She knows only to speak in bits and pieces. And she is also introduced to Western food culture in the name of modernity, which alienates her all the more from the crowd. And she feels a sick horror at all the false values that have been practiced by the women folk in that party in the name of modernity. She is finding herself in the midst of modern women, their clothes not covering their nakedness, but rather adorning their nakedness, and the vulgarity of their movements to music. She hates all this. This is another culturally displaced experiences of a conservative woman in a modern setting. To introduce a pictorial glimpse of the text, the writer, the memoir, and the Bhutan's surrounding, this is the book Beyond the Sky and the Earth, penned by Jamie Zeppa, whose image is next to the book, and an image of the school. Her first posting is in a remote place, a remote village school in eastern part of Bhutan. So I have brought a picture of a remote school with a few students hanging around at the mountainous background. It's a mountain terrain. Then you can also find the pictures of girls and boys in their traditional dress. From this school, in 2 years, she gets shifted to the only premier college then, that was known as Sherepse College. You can see the clock tower and the image. And it is a Buddhist nation. You can find the monks in maroon robe. Now let me move on to the cultural transition, which happens for an immigrant through 4 stages. First is called honeymoon stage, followed by a conflict stage, then comes adjustment, and finally acceptance. Honeymoon stage, that brings certain emotions, positive emotions, like because everything is new, everyone is new, it produces an excitement, euphoria, anticipation, and there is a sense of eagerness that it creates. But this positive emotion may not last long. That was the experience of Jamie Zeppa. Even prior to her travel, she experienced this. She felt a sense of poetry by looking at the black and white pictures, photos of Bhutan, published in the 1960s and early 70s. It were like a certain poem, and it left a little hole inside her. This was her poetic feeling towards Bhutan before she started from her home country, that is Toronto. But did this feeling last forever? No, because this feeling is an initial feeling that may not last long for most of the expatriates. And followed by this stage, there is the conflict stage. This conflict stage has certain symptoms of frustration, such as difficulty in sleeping, sadness, homesickness, exhaustion, worries. There will be crying sadness that cannot be explained, and even overeating. These are the symptoms of this conflicting and frustrating stage. As soon as she reached Bhutan, we find Jemi Zepa in this conflicting stage. It is a real change, a real shift from one part of the world to another part where the cultural differences are stark and striking, contrary to her practices. So here let me brief on the cross-cultural encounters that she has experienced. As soon as she reached the Paro airport in Bhutan, she felt lost. She finds that her passport, visa is missing, and she has lost her luggage, which foreshadows the suffering and the struggle that she has to undergo in this new place with a new culture that is contrary to hers. And she is haunted by feelings of loneliness and angst, cut off from all her social connections. Suddenly she feels, I don't fit in here. Maybe I have made a mistake. Maybe Bhutan is not for me, because she could neither converse nor befriend anybody, primarily because of the cultural differences and differences in language. Therefore, her identity tend to be always in crisis. We can see all these symptoms experienced by her in this stage of conflict and frustration. She wishes to go to sleep and wake up in Canada. She feels life is suffering and she feels like crying. I sit on the floor and cry. And when I have finished, I have decided I will go home in the morning. She wanted to make some excuses, send a telegram to Thimphu saying that she is sick, that she wanted to go back to her country. She thinks of a lot of excuses. And she is also worried how to connect herself. The question raised by her lover before she started from Canada. There was no phone in the eastern part of Bhutan then. How to connect herself with her family. There was a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach, as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff. These were some of the initial experiences of Jemi Zepa due to stark socio-cultural differences. She could not adjust with certain Bhutanese customs, such as higher the rank, the lower the bow. The extremity of the two worlds left her in a confused state, and she started lamenting over this clash with a sense of homesickness infused with pain, suffering, and grief. She felt alienated from her roots. As a dislocated individual, she hopes to meet people of her kind, that is whites, with similar culture, and one who speaks the same language in the same pace with her. So this initial loss of identity caused by this physical and cultural alienation becomes the first obstacle in her quest for self-discovery, which she was enthusiastic about before she started her journey. But now she is all in depression. Moving to the third and the fourth stage. Okay, depression is not forever. Even the conflict and the frustration stage is followed by another stage known as adjustment stage. And she has joined her school. So one of her colleagues advised her, orient her to adapt to the new culture. Rather than crying about it, adapt to the new culture and start building your new identity was the advice given to her. And here, if I draw the argument of Stuart Hall, who establishes the nature of diasporic identities to be constantly producing and reproducing themselves anew through transformation and difference. This is what she experiences now in the process of adjustment. First comes language. She is posted in a remote village where the natives speak only their local dialect, not in English. They speak their local dialect known as Sharchop, which she could not understand. Therefore, she feels lost. This is her first predicament, language as a communication barrier. Quote unquote, let me read the narration. I point to what I want in the shop. She goes for shopping. She could not communicate, so she points, sign language. She uses sign language to communicate her requirement. I want to point out what I want in the shop. I am smiling painfully and nodding at the shopkeeper's questions. She is nodding without understanding what the question is. What was the question? Then she decides, I cannot live here if I don't speak the language. This becomes her first barrier, which prevented her from socializing with the community or becoming one with the community to experience a sense of belongingness in the new place, with the new people and in the new culture. Realizing the need for language to exist, that becomes the primary need, an essential requirement for her existence. She started talking about language a lot with students, about English and Sharchop, about Zonka, and also about Nepali. And this is her first attempt to acquire language. Then she crosses through the different cultural markers, such as starting with food, then dress code, then comes to language, and then finally she embraces religion. So these are the different cultural markers with which she adapts herself. She states regarding food, my chili intake has increased, but I am still no match for the Bhutanese teachers who are loading up large jute sacks. And my students tell me that they cannot eat without chilies. Here, as readers, one could get a glimpse of the Bhutanese food culture where chili, cheese, rice, and potatoes become the lifeline. And she also learns to prepare the Bhutan's delicacy, the Bhutanese delicacy known as emadasi. It is a dish with chili cooked in cheese, local cheese, and she gets used to drinks like ara, a locally brewed drink, in place of whiskey or wine, and starts wearing the Bhutanese national dress for women known as kira. This way, she strives her best to adapt to the culture of her new home country to experience the sense of belongingness with the culture. She too adopts the Bhutanese values and customs. By not stepping over the religious books, she learns to flick over a drop of tea on the ground before drinking, and this is a sign of offering to the hungry ghosts, appeased hungry ghosts, whose excessive desire in the previous lives have left them wandering in the realm of perpetual lack and longing. Contrary to the rationality of her Western orientation, she truly adapts herself to these local beliefs without questioning the practices. She also remembers to follow the Bhutanese etiquette, not to sit cross-legged, and to wait for the chief guest to begin drinking his tea before the others touch theirs, and the custom to obey order without retaliation and to speak in a lower voice as a sign of respect, which is considered to be part of Bhutanese culture, and all these compelled Zepa to change her manners. And then comes religion. She even tried to practice Buddhism in an experimental way because she is aware of Buddhist practices from her boyfriend, Robert, who was a Zen follower. She tried meditation to empty her mind, but she was unable to get rid of herself. These are all the ways and means by which Zepa tries to assimilate herself. However she tries, her life is not without regrets, and many a times she repents her decision, and there is a constant dilemma she undergoes. And from this third stage of adjustment comes the process of constructing. She is relatively successful in adapting herself to these challenges. And now comes the process of constructing a new identity and becoming a Bhutanese. or embracing the new culture in the real sense of the term. And to do this, to construct her new identity, she goes to a farther extent. She does two things. She becomes a Buddhist, as she considers Buddhism not as a religion, but as a philosophy. And according to Appadurai, cultural identity is an individual's realization of the spectrum of cultures. This is what Zeppa attempts to do. She realizes she wants to construct a new identity by realizing and positioning herself in the spectrum of cultures, that is, in its beliefs, practices, in the behavior, everything she changes to accommodate herself in this new culture. And she wanted to be accepted into the group, into that particular group, by adopting certain characteristics of that particular group. As a result, automatically, the group will assign the individual its group membership. That's the belief. And with that notion, she changes her faith first from a Catholic to by a Buddhist. She becomes a Buddhist. And perhaps this change of faith is also to get married to a Bhutanese student and then to create a place for herself in this imagined home. So by means of cultural immersion stage, she attempts to shape her new identity, which is actually denounced by her fellow Canadian Julie, because she decides to, she shifts to college, she falls in love with a Bhutanese student, and she decides to marry the student as a sign of accepting the new culture in the new place, which is critiqued by a fellow Canadian. I think that's a wise thing to wish for. For one thing, you will never really belong here. Even if you get married to a Bhutanese, even if you stay here for years and years, it won't ever be your place in Bhutan by saying, well, I can understand the way you feel now because it's beautiful. And it's so different from where you the Bhutanese student, their official marriage gets registered between Sewang and her, and she decides to return to Canada after 10 years of stay in Bhutan. Therefore, her assimilation is also in question. It remains rather incomplete, though she refers to both the places as her home. This is here to talk a bit on the expatriates who are working abroad. Irrespective of the number of years they spend in the foreign land, they ultimately belong to their roots, is one inherent reality we find here. They belong to their country of origin, because at some point of time they have to return and reconnect themselves with the home. To this fact, Zeppa's life is no different. She felt some need to go back to Canada and to reconnect herself. And as a result, she leaves at the end of the 10th year, but her identity remains assorted between the indigenous Canadian and the new Bhutanese one. During these experiences, her assimilation is not without culture shock. There are series of culture shock and conflicts that she experienced during the process of adjustment. I have made a list of the shocking experiences and the new experiences that she had come across. So when one moves from a familiar culture to an unfamiliar one and encounters a new environment with new people and new way of life, then culture shock is inevitable. And when we don't find that the familiar culture does not exist in this new land, in the new environment, consequently, the immigrant tend to become anxious and frustrated with certain anger and disbelief. And this is an encounter that happens between individuals or groups from two different cultures with different values, behavior, practices, which results in their cultural conflict. And in the memoir, Jamie Zeppa elaborates on her conflicts with the Bhutanese culture in explicit and implicit ways. Her experiences of culture shock initially made it difficult for her to accept the new cultural setting, but moving through a process of frustration, she finally adjusts herself to the new cultural conditions. I have listed a series of cultural shock that she has experienced. During her initial stay teaching grade 2 students in the school and later at Sherepse College in Konglung, she encountered different types of cultural shock that became inevitable for an immigrant moving to a different cultural setting. Visitors to Bhutan usually get stunned to see phallus image painted as an art adorning the exterior of Bhutanese houses. Then another shocking practice revealed to her by her teaching colleague is the peculiar culture of night hunting that was prevalent, not now. It is a stealthy courtship practice which involves a boy sneaking into a girl's house at night for coitus with or without permission. This practice is prevalent among youngsters to find their partners, but this has caused social problems too, such as illicit relation, illegitimate children, and single mothers, and this culture has vanished with development. Then she was shocked to find Bhutanese lavishly wasting their time doing nothing. And this makes her question, do these people have all the time in the world or what? Because everywhere there is a wait. After ordering food in the restaurant, one has to wait for breakfast or lunch in the hotel because only after taking the order they will start cooking. And standing in the counter in shops or offices, or stuck behind a truck which is blocking a lane, but then it was a single lane. And she wonders why the bakery isn't open when the sign clearly says it's open at 8 a.m., but it's already 8:20. So these cultural differences that she points out seem to be a dig at the Asian way of life. Unlike Westerners, Asians in general and Bhutanese in particular have the entire world's time to wait for friends, relatives, or parents and for lunch to be served at hotels. And she also points out the hypocrisy in the gap between the Bhutanese, what Bhutanese profess and practice. So she comes to observe this hypocrisy in the fourth stage. In the final acceptance stage, the immigrant could see the difference between the good and the bad aspects of the culture. They could make the variation between the good and the bad aspects of the host country's culture against the cultural environment which they grew up and with the signs and symbols that are normal, that are considered normal and universal. So she is making this rational difference. She is able to differentiate and see some of the hypocrisies, such as inequalities and injustices that are prevalent in the Bhutanese system as in the Western societies. She starts noticing these differences. That also shows part of her last stage when she could differentiate these things. Then when the matron opens the letter that the girls receive, most of them are hostelites. Whenever girls receive mail that is first opened by the matron, she reads it before handing over the letter to the girls. And this was another set of values that she could not accept, and it was quite shocking. This practice is not without reason, because the matron says, girls mail, first the matron has to read, and she reads one mail. See this one, the boy is writing. It is not from her parents or from her family. A boy is writing to a girl. My dearest Dechen, I'm missing you a hell lot. That's the reason the matron want to read the letter before giving it to the girl. They want to read who has written the letter and whether to give it or not. That decision is made by the matron. Otherwise, girls will spoil their studies. And Zeppa then observes the reality where many girls drop out because they don't understand the value of education. Either they were needed at home for farm work, or the parents, or they get married, or the parents felt that education was irrelevant. This was the scene in 1980s, but today the scene has changed. We find more girl students than boys in tertiary education. And then until 1990s and till 2000, corporal punishment was in place. And this was another shocking experience for her, that students were hit when they come late, when they could not answer, when they forget to bring their books, and now it's banned. Then the traffic signal. There is less traffic. In the capital city, Thimphu, she observes there is no signal light, but rather police use their hand gesture to regulate the limited traffic. That was quite new for her. And then comes the traditional healing system. And it was a traumatic experience for her in opposition to her rational belief in medical science. When she comes across the practice of traditional healing system, starting from the usage of local herbs and shrubs to that of bloodletting and searing to treat different ailments by the local practitioners. And this had been the case before the establishment of basic health units in the rural parts of Bhutan. But with the advent of modern medical facilities, these old practices have disappeared. And culture shock, in any sense, it creates an apprehension because of such differences. And it may also give a hostile feeling of frustration and anger as one continues to be experiencing unfavorable events that may be strange or even offensive to one's cultural attitude. As a result, Zeppa feels frustrated and angered over all the struggles and hardships that she faces in this foreign land, miles away from her home country and its culture. But despite all these cultural differences, finally she professes her love for Bhutan by rejecting all these differences and asserts, I will not leave Bhutan until I have lived here thoroughly, until it seeps into me, into blood, bone, cell, until I am full of it and changed by it. Here comes the cultural assimilation, which is a process of integrating into the new culture, again in 3 stages. It can be at the individual, group, and cultural level. So all these have been collectively undergone by her. At the individual level, she started speaking the local language more slowly and formally, answering everything in complete sentences, not in a word or phrase, and standing almost at rapt attention to receive the language and to learn the new words. And then she adjusted herself with the food culture. When the rice was served with as a dumpling with meat, red chilies, and onions on the mound, she learned to say thank you, and she enjoyed eating the meat and the rice. It was delicious. She started appreciating that culture, and the food habit she has changed. Then at the group level, she participated in the religious ceremonies when she was invited for puja in her colleagues' houses. And she also learned to cook Bhutanese delicacies from her class 2 children and later from college students. All these evidently shows her different levels of assimilation with the new culture. And then in college, she also professed her love for a Bhutanese student, and she dreamt about marrying him and starting a new life in Bhutan. She felt that's the sign of her acceptance and to find her place in this land. But At the same time, she is constantly plagued by doubts. There are a lot of things that worries her, and she panics while making decisions. She is very slow in her decision-making process because she is plagued by self-doubts and uncertainties about their identity difference even before marriage. But that's how it ends. She says, I cannot go on like this, plagued by doubts. I have to go back to Canada. That's her final decision. I don't think Bhutan allows dual citizenship. I love Bhutan. That's what she professes. Finally, her admiration for Bhutan is immense, but she is not ready to live there forever. That's her realization at the end. At times, she feels alienated and displaced continuously, which resulted in questioning her self-identity throughout her stay. Now coming to Atiya Hussein's context, I have, through Jamie Zeppa's memoir, I have listed all the emotional conflicts that an immigrant, a woman, experiences as an immigrant in a new culture, in a new country, is culturally displaced. This is no different from a married woman who is moved into another culture of her husband or into the new social circle of her husband. Rather, that is also a cultural displacement. Some of the crucial lines I have brought from the story, which will relate the experience of the newly wed woman with that of the experiences of an expatriate. There is no name. She is introduced as my wife by her husband into his social circle, and that's the first party. Her shy glance avoided their eyes when her husband introduced her as my wife. Then she drew her sari. From this, we come to know, yes, she is an Indian and she is following the Indian culture. She drew her sari over her hands, covering her rings and bracelets, noticing there are other women in that party, but their wrists are bare, like that of widows. That's the comparison she could make. And she wished she had not dressed so. That's her immediate mental response, even if it was the custom, because no one seemed to care for the customs or even tend to know them. Then other guests come in. She shrank into her chair. The hall gets crowded, but she feels more lonely. And she feels very strange in that atmosphere, and she dreads. If anybody approaches her, she fears their approach. This is how she alienates herself from the crowd. Then from shock and distress, she also turns to disgust and anger. This is another common response of the expatriates, which is witnessed here. When her husband drinks, she finds it was wicked. It was sinful to drink, and she could not forgive. So that shows her value system is different. And she is from a conservative background, and the modern values are incomprehensible for her, or she retaliates against the modern values. And then comes the food serving. Even this food culture is different for her, because she was given a plate with sandwich, saying, try this sandwich. The olives are good. She had never seen the olive before, but she did not want to admit. She receives it, but she could not taste it. She didn't like it. And the room closed in on her. Like the future closing in on Jamie Zeppa, here the room, the one room, that atmosphere and that difference in culture closes in on her with noise, smoke, and jarring music. There are women around. She could not connect herself with those women. They were her own kind. They were also women, yet they are not, because they are mimicking the foreign culture. Maybe they are in India, but they are mimicking the foreign culture. And she felt no hatred against them because she expected nothing better from them. Then a man came and asked her to dance with him. This is another cultural shock for her. She shrank back in horror. It is not her husband who came and picked her hand, it was somebody else. So this strangeness made her feel the horror. She trembled with violent complexity of feelings such as anger, hatred, jealousy, and bewilderment. And all these commotion in values and conflict in her mind is let aloud. When she spells out her thoughts rather loud by saying, "Leave me alone," she retorts to that man. And at the end, she longs for the sanctuary of home, the four walls, from which marriage provided an adventurous escape, but then marriage has led her to this social circle, which is culturally alienating her further. Finally, this is her response. She got up, ran to the veranda, put her head against the pillar to wet it with tears. So to cry, that inner cry of Jamie Zeppa can be compared with the literal external cry of shedding tears of this woman when they are culturally displaced in an alien atmosphere. This is the reason, due to the similarity of emotions experienced, I have brought this comparison here. Now moving on to the conclusion. Having decided to leave Bhutan, Zeppa makes a decision to go back to Canada to reconnect herself. But at the same time, leaving Bhutan is a terrifying truth and a terrifying fact for her. She leaves her husband and she leaves her newborn child. She says, "I'm vaguely afraid to leave Bhutan, afraid that the magic door will snap shut and I will be on the wrong side." But she continues to embrace Bhutan as her adopted home, though she did not stay there permanently. She escapes from Canada to this small world, and now she goes back to Canada. There is an irreversible transformation in this process. When she reaches Canada, she feels she could not connect herself with the Canadian life. She feels the Canadian life is very sophisticated, but still it is irrelevant. There is something missing. She finds it rather irrelevant because now she got used to the limited resources and a simple way of life, leading with innocent people. So the cultural impact of Bhutan continue to stay with her in the form of simplicity, innocence, Buddhist values, then the philosophy of GNH, which is the secret of happiness of the people, and the peace. So she finds peace within her, and she finds the Canadian life more insignificant and more irrelevant. This is her realization at the end. So she feels there is a transformation within her. She has learned to be content with life, contentment. That's the biggest learning she has taken from Bhutan. It's Buddhism, it's philosophy of GNH, that becomes the secret for her peace and happiness in her life and in future. And with that, her overall attitude towards life changes. Her perception changes. She alters her priorities, more importantly, and changes her perception towards life. And to get back to the title of the book, Beyond the Sky and the Earth. That is the translation of the indigenous phrase, Name Same Kadinche. Kadinche is the local expression to express thanks. And this expression conveys one's gratitude and thankfulness beyond the boundaries. And she wanted to express her thankfulness to the experiences of Bhutan, which has changed her perception towards life, made her a new person. Though she could not stay, she continued to shuffle between Bhutan and Canada, and she remains indebted and thankful to you, that is to Bhutan, as if she is married to Bhutan itself, metaphorically, by thanking the country beyond the sky and the earth for its experiences. Yeah, that's the end. With that note, I also thank the organizers for this opportunity, which makes me feel connected with my state. Thank you. Shall I stop sharing?
Yes, ma'am.
Now it's time for discussion.
Yes.
I also request the Bhutan scholars to share their views.
Yeah, now I invite them to share their views. This happened in 1988. And this memoir talks about the experiences till 1998. That was the time when Bhutan was experiencing modernization and it was in the developmental stage. Now rapid changes have happened since 2000 and today we find many Bhutanese going to Australia for work and studies. So this is the recent change and the shift in the scenario, which my scholars and students will update.
Now, if they wish, they can unmute them. Please unmute yourself and speak.
Students, you can unmute yourselves and speak.
Yes, good morning.
You
Good
can
morning.
introduce yourself. We could hear you, Kinzan. Please go ahead.
Good morning to you all. My name is Kinzan Rizin from Bhutan, working as a teacher and currently undergoing a master's program in Yanphala College under Dr. Chitra. Thank you. Thank you. Beyond the sky and earth, Namaste Karenche. In the beginning of the presentation, I feel so mercy to the author. And at the end of the presentation, I feel so proud. Despite the hardship faced by the author, Jimmy Zepa, she contributes so many things to the education system in Bhutan. And at the end, she assimilated all the cultures of Bhutan, and she has made a greater contribution. So, very similar to this difficulty faced by the author Jimmy Zepa, today many Buddhist people, their dreamland is Australia, and hundreds and thousands of Buddhist people, they have settled in Australia. And very similar difficulties faced by Jimmy Zepa, this kind of difficulties are also being faced by Buddhist people in Australia. Our country, Bhutan, is a developing country, and when they move to a developed country, they face a lot of difficulties as faced by the other. The resources that we have in our country are all primitive when they reach to the developed countries. In our country, Bhutan, still today, we do not have indoor toilet. We do not have electricity. We do not have technology. We do not have we do not have Western household goods. And when they reach to developed countries like Australia, they do have advanced technology. They do have advanced Western households, and they do have so many technological equipments that they are facing a lot of difficulties to operate. Recently, one of my friends who got scholarship in Australia, he faced a lot of difficulties to find toilet, and after finding toilet, he could not open. And after the entry, he is not able to unlock, and he left in the toilet for a day. So this kind of difficulties are being faced by Buddhist people when they move to a third world country, very similar like Jimmy Zepa. Many foreigners, when they come to Bhutan, all the resources, all the local resources that they find, they are primitive. Very similar to this, when our Buddhist people, they move to third world country, the resources that they have is very, very primitive. We become a technological, we become technophobe. So this is what I have assimilated from Dr. Chitra's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kingjeng.
Yeah, next, anybody?
I think Kinga is starting.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, doctor.
Yeah, you can proceed.
Hello, good morning. I am Kinga Jamso, studying under the same college as mentioned by one of the friends earlier, under Dr. Chitra. So after doctor's presentation, I came to learn about the assimilation for two different cultures at the end of the presentation. So the author had finally realized the kind of a culture that she belonged, and the kind of a culture that she moved to, kind of a new land. At the end, somehow the author had found kind of a relevance, kind of a assimilation that is needed for one's growth and for one's exploring and experience. So otherwise, as an individual, one cannot remain aloof from the cultural expertise or the cultural advancement, especially today's 21st century. Despite Bhutan being the least developed nation, Jimmy Zipa finally realized that Bhutan at that time was quite in developed stage. So even there wasn't any telephonic materials, any advanced technologies that were little prevalent today in our country. Somehow, author had adapted to this kind of new culture. For first time, she was experiencing and exploring, despite the kind of shortage the Bhutan was during those time. Now, what I come to understand is still with this least development, Bhutan has lots to produce to the world, or as Bhutan is one should feel proud with the kind of culture that we are been to or close to or intact with. So even like Jimmy Zipa, when she first moved to the remotest place in Pema Kosal, she found herself lost in the little world where it's being departed from the modernization or globalization. So after stays more than years, so now she adjusts or adapted the culture, and which can realizes that now with the new advent of globalization or modernization or the cultural exchange, so one could appreciate and one could uphold or embrace a kind of cultural assimilation. That is where today most of in the world things like that is taking place. So these are the kind of experiences that the author wanted to share in her book, the Beyond the Sky and the Earth. So literally, as the presenter concluded with Name Samika Dinshe, which is translated to the thank you, Bhutan being, for giving me kind of teaching me kind of lessons that based on the Buddhist and the Jain age context philosophy that has been quite unique to the outside world, and how the author had learned through this interaction to the Bhutanese culture and the kind of the way that Bhutan had been living with. So this how I understood. Thank you, Doctor and Professors.
I would like to share the cover page of the book for the participants' notice. This is the book
Yeah.
with its cover page. And this book and there are also other prominent travelogues which can be taken for any research by Indian students, by the research scholars. The language is lucid and clear and very sophisticated. And there are 2-3 travelogues like this which captures the experiences in the second half of the 20th century, and another published in 2013 by another travel writer known as Married to Bhutan. So these two are good literary sources to pursue research at master's level. Now, shall I move to check the chat box and answer the question, sir? Sir?
Yeah, what I can see is now only compliments. No questions up to now. Somebody asked a question about what is this, Beyond the Sky, but that you have already shown that book. It is the name.
And I have concluded with that phrase.
Yeah. No, actually,
There is one question.
Yeah.
Kirtana Nair has asked, home and world, are they two distinct notions or are they synonymous? Yeah, that distinction has been used to show the difference in concept between place of origin and destination. The home country and the host country, how they are different. So that has been shown, and how Professor Vandy has considered them both as together. He never distinguishes them. The place of origin and destination are equally important because both of them are significant to construct the new identity of the expatriate. So that's how I see it. And another one says, the fact stated here is expatriates ultimately return to their roots. Is this applicable to first generation immigrants only? As of now, we have seen this is applicable to first generation immigrants to return to their roots. But even the second and third generation immigrants, when they grow old, maybe they might want to return to their roots, because we come across the concept of homelessness time and again in literary studies, which convincingly communicates to the readers that home and roots are finally yearned for, desired for, in order to relocate oneself. Maybe as the generations grow old, they might feel different.
Yeah, that's quite possible. And sometimes people towards their old age go beyond nation state.
Yes. That's the experience we have seen, and that's what literary studies have recorded too, as of now.
Yeah. No, even in India, many Punjabi diaspora people, the old age people, they moved from Punjab to Canada. So, let's see if there are any other questions.
That's all, sir.
Yeah. So now I hand over the charge to our coordinator, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, sir. We'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Now we are going to conclude the session with an end note. Our keynote speaker, Chitra ma'am, has clearly elaborated on diasporic sensibilities of women across cultures, Atiyah Hussein's short story, and Jamie Zappa's memoir. I wholeheartedly thank you, ma'am, for your informative and lucid presentation. And I truly appreciate and wish to thank each and everyone for patiently lending their ears to enrich their literary knowledge. And my special thanks goes to Dr. Kiran Arora for her presence. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
So, ma'am,
Sir?
shall we conclude now?
Yes, we can close and we can come back at 2 o'clock for the valedictory function.
Okay.
We'll start by 1:45 by entering,
Okay.
or we can...
Yeah, I will start it at 1:40.
Okay, sir. Only we two.
Means I will open this Zoom ID at 1:40.
Okay, sir.
People can join in from 1:40 onwards, and session will start as and when you people want it.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
bye.
when is your valedictory address?
At 2
Sir, when is your valedictory address?
Ma'am, at 2 o'clock.
2.
At 2 today.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Bye. Bye to all of you.
Yeah.
Meet
Bye.
at 2.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Welcome.